Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to our live session today. Today, we're going to discuss part two of tenses and voices, where we're going to discuss briefly the simple past tense, the past continuous tense, the past perfect tense, and the past perfect continuous tense. Okay? All right, then. So let's not delay any longer, and let's just begin straight away. Tenses and voices. Part two, the simple past tense, the past continuous tense, the past perfect tense, and the past perfect continuous tense. Right? Moving forward, let's begin with the simple past tense. So what do we have in the simple past tense? Rule number one, we use the simple past tense for an action or an event that occurred in the past and is finished at the time of speaking. To indicate the past, we use adverbs or phrases of time such as at one time, many years ago, in 2015, last month, yesterday, later, once, etc. Right? So when we want to talk about past events or actions that took place in the past, that began in the past and that finished in the past, and we want to talk about them. So what we do is to talk about them, we use the simple past tense. We talk about them, we describe their situations or actions in the simple past tense. Let's take a look at the example under rule number one. Yesterday, I went to a dentist. Yesterday, I went to a dentist. Here, the sentence describes something I did in the past. So I did something in the past, and I did something yesterday, which is, of course, an incident of past or an event or an adverb of time. And what did I do yesterday? I went to a dentist. So went is the past form of the verb go, right? Okay. Rule number two, we use the simple past tense to refer to an action which took place over a period in the past and is finished at the point of speaking. We use the simple past tense to refer to an action which took place over a period in the past and is finished at the point of speaking. Furthermore, we use the simple past tense to report certain past events or situations in newspapers, magazines, or journals, right? Now, in the first rule, we have come to learn that, we can talk about past events or events that took place in the past maybe at one go. Maybe the duration of those actions were not so, the duration of such an action was not so long. Maybe it was just a one-off event, but you want to talk of something that took place for a longer period of time, and that took place in the past, right? So what do you do? In this case, what you do is, of course, you definitely talk about it in the past tense, but at the same time, you come up with a time phrase to explain that the situation or the action took place for a longer time. How so? Let's take a look at the examples. Example number one, Andrew served as a test pilot with the Air Force for 6 years before joining a commercial airline. Andrew served as a test pilot with the Air Force for 6 years before joining a commercial airline. A past action lasting for a period. Here, Andrew serving as a test pilot took place in the past, right? He's not serving as a test pilot any longer, but he used to do so. And he did so for a longer period of time, as in for a long period of time. And for how long exactly? For 6 years. So by the term or by the phrase 6 years or for 6 years, you're also giving the time, you're also telling the time for which or throughout which Andrew served as a test pilot, right? Okay. The second example under rule number two is hundreds of school children cheering and waving flags greeted the visiting heads of state. Hundreds of school children cheering and waving flags greeted the visiting heads of state. Here, you are reporting a past event, right? So, when we read in the newspaper or when we read the newspaper, what do we find? We find that, the newspapers report so many past events, so many past incidents, and they do so in the simple past tense to talk of something that happened recently and happened in the past, right? So hundreds of school children cheering and waving flags greeted the visiting heads of state. So here, the verb greeted is in its past form, the past form of the verb greet. And by the word greeted, you mean something that was done in the past. Okay? All right. Let's see what rule number 3 is. All right, we have a question here. I think we have a query here. Let's try to answer this query a bit. So Moinul Morshed is asking, I did beginner course and participated all the quiz, though I have registered again for the advanced course. I've not gotten any quiz yesterday. Okay, are you sure that you registered properly? As in, like, have you filled in your email address correctly? If you have, then you're supposed to get the quiz. If you haven't, then understandably, the email or the quiz hasn't reached you. However, I would like you to register again today, inshallah, with all the details properly put and properly spelled. Do so. I'll see to it that you get the quizzes, inshallah. All right. Okay. Rule number 3. We use used to. Take a look at rule number 3. We use used to plus the base form of a verb to refer to an event or which took place regularly in the past, but which does not happen anymore. We use used to plus the base form of a verb to refer to an event which took place regularly in the past, but which does not happen anymore, right? So there are many things that we used to do in the past, isn't that we used to do those, but we don't do them anymore, right? So when you want to talk of something like that, how do you say so? You use the term, you use the phrase used to, right? Used to plus the base form of the verb, right? Base form of the verb that defines the action that you used to do in the past, such as, take a look at the example under rule number 3. We used to swim and play tennis every Sunday at the club when we were in college. We used to swim and play tennis every Sunday at the club when we were in college. Now note, right after the phrase used to, you're putting the verb that you used to do. And note that this verb is in its base form, right? You haven't changed the verb to its past tense form or to its past participle form, but you keep it just in its base form. But how do you exactly define that this was done in the past? By the phrase used to before it. So you say, we used to swim and play tennis every Sunday at the club when we were in college. Okay? All right. Kisor Kaushik is asking me to repeat rule number 2 of simple past. Of course, I will. Okay. Number 2. We use the simple past tense to refer to an action which took place over a period in the past and is finished at the point of speaking. Furthermore, we use the simple past tense to report certain past events or situations in newspapers, magazines, journals. So, many a time what you do is you only want to talk about certain actions that took place in the past, and maybe those actions were one-off events. It's like they just happened just like that. Those actions did not take place for a long duration, right? But there are some other events that took place for a longer duration, such as, for example, in the first example, under rule number 2, Andrew served as a test pilot with the Air Force for 6 years before joining a commercial airline, right? In this case, you see, you're talking about a past event that took place in the past. And how do you describe so? You say so by using the past form of the verb serve, right? As soon as you say so, you mean that the incident or the event or the action took place in the past, but you also want to tell, or you also want to describe that that very action took place for a long time. And how do you do so? You bring in the time phrase here, right? By mentioning the time or the duration for which or throughout which the action took place, you say for how long exactly the action took place, right? Such as Andrew served as a test pilot with the Air Force for 6 years, right? So Andrew served as a test pilot with the Air Force for 6 years before doing something else. Before what? Before joining a commercial airline. Before joining a commercial airlines. Before joining a commercial airline, Andrew served as a test pilot with the Air Force for 6 years, right? Here, in this sentence, you mean that Andrew served as a test pilot and he doesn't serve as a test pilot any longer. Now he's a commercial pilot, but before becoming a commercial pilot, he was a test pilot for how long? For 6 years. Okay, I hope I'm clear. All right, we've got some questions over here. Samuel Hassan is asking, do we need to register every day to get the quizzes? Of course not. You need to register only once. If you have registered well, then you are supposed to receive the quizzes. If you haven't registered properly, as in like if you haven't filled in your if you haven't filled in your details properly, then probably just maybe you will not. Maybe in that case you will not receive your quizzes. Okay, so make sure that you have filled out the form properly and you have provided all the necessary details properly and that you've spelled your details correctly as well. Okay. All right. Russell Arman is asking, how can we get quizzes? To get the quizzes, of course, you have to register with us. So you see there is the registration. The registration link is given in the post. Look for it. Go to the link, register, get yourself registered with us. All right. You will receive the quizzes, inshallah. Okay. I hope the simple past tense is clear. If it is not clear, please do let me know in the comment section. I will try to clarify your confusions, inshallah. All right, moving forward to the next slide, we have the past continuous tense. When do we speak or when do we talk in the past continuous tense? Number one, we use the past continuous tense to talk about an action that was going on at a definite time in the past, or that an action or situation continued for a period in the past, right? Be observant. We use the past continuous tense to talk about an action that was going on at a definite time in the past, or that an action or situation continued for a period in the past. So you want to talk of a past event that took place continuously, or that was taking place continuously until, of course, another following time, right? Let's take a look at the examples. Example number one, under rule number one. At 4:30 yesterday afternoon, I was giving a lecture on the simple past tense. At 4:30 yesterday afternoon, I was giving a lecture on the simple past tense, on the simple present tense live on Facebook. So I want to tell you what I was doing exactly yesterday at 4:30, right? So to talk of something that you were doing at a definite time, you use the past continuous tense. Use the past continuous tense. So you say at 4:30 yesterday afternoon, or at 2:30 or at 6:30 yesterday evening, I was offering my Maghrib prayer. At 7:30 in the evening yesterday, I was talking to my friend, right? So was giving, was talking, was offering. These are all in the present continuous tense, in the past continuous tense. And how so? Why so? Because you're talking of something, you're talking of a past event along with the exact timing of it, along with the exact time of it. Exactly, you're mentioning exactly when that particular action occurred, right? Okay. Number two, example number two under rule number one. Paul and his little son were painting with crayons for hours before dinner time. Follow this. Paul and his little son were Paul and his little son were painting with crayons for hours before dinner time. So what's happening in this case? You see, you also want to tell what was happening until another time, until a following event took place. So to talk of certain things, or to talk of certain actions, such actions, you can use the past continuous tense. So you say, Paul and his little son were painting with crayons for hours before dinner time, right? Or you could say, my friend and I, or I was waiting for you at the bus station until late afternoon, right? I was waiting for you at the bus station until late afternoon, as in you were waiting at the bus station until a certain time, until a certain period of time, right? Until a certain time, all right? Okay. All right, rule number two of the past continuous tense. We use the past continuous tense or the simple past tense to talk about two actions that were going on at the same time in the past. Now, you have two actions, all right? You want to talk of two past actions that were taking place at the same time, that occurred or that were occurring simultaneously. So you want to talk of such two actions. So what do? You employ the past continuous tense. You say, Alex, take a look at the example number one under rule number two. Alex was checking the accounts while Cynthia was reading her report. So two things were happening, right? Two actions were taking place. First action, or one action being Alex checking his accounts, and the other being Cynthia reading her reports, right? So Alex was checking the accounts while Cynthia was reading her report. So when you want to talk of two simultaneous events at one go, right, you use or you employ the past continuous tense. Also note that two simultaneous past events, two past events that took place at the same time can also be said in the simple past tense, like in example number 2 under rule number 2. Alex checked the accounts while Cynthia read her report. This is also fine. Instead of switching the tense to the past continuous tense, you can choose to keep it in the simple past tense and just simply say, Alex checked the accounts while Cynthia read her report. Okay, I hope we're clear. Moving on to the next slide. We have the past continuous tense and rule number 3, or the rule number 3 of the past continuous tense. To talk about an action that happened while a longer action was going on. Okay, I'll enlarge the screen. To talk about an action that happened while a longer action was going on in the past, we use the past continuous tense for the longer action, the simple past tense for the shorter action. Okay, now in this case, unlike rule number 2, or not exactly unlike, but similar to rule number 2, here in rule number 3, what you have is, of course, two actions again, right? But you've got two actions now, but one of the actions took place for a longer time than the other action. And to talk about the longer action, or to express or to describe the longer action, you use the past continuous tense. And to describe the shorter action, you use the simple past tense, right? Like in the example under rule number 3, Ted and I were looking for our English dictionary when a friend came and lent us his. Ted and I were looking for our English dictionary when a friend came and lent us his. Now here, were looking is clearly, of course, the past continuous tense, and came and lent are in the simple past tense. So Ted and I were looking for our English dictionary when a friend came and lent us his. Okay, Ted and I were looking. So Ted and I, our looking for the English dictionary is an action that took place, or that was taking place for a longer duration, right? When exactly, or when we were doing so, someone came to us and lent us his dictionary. So someone coming to us and lending his dictionary took place for a shorter period of time, or took place quite swiftly, right? Looking, of course, takes longer. Walking up to someone and giving someone something takes place in a very short period of time. So the shorter action is said in the simple past tense. The longer action is said in the past continuous tense. So we say, Ted and I were looking for our English dictionary when a friend came and lent us his. Okay? All right, rule number 4. Let's go to rule number 4. What do we have here? We use the past continuous tense to talk about repeated actions in the past with adverbs of frequency, such as always, forever, etc. Moreover, we also use the past continuous tense to talk about a future action that was planned in the past but did not take place for some reason, right? We use the past continuous tense to talk about repeated actions. Okay, yeah. In the past with adverbs of frequency, such as always, forever, etc. Moreover, we also use the past continuous tense to talk about a future action that was planned in the past but did not take place for some reason. All right, so you want to talk about something that used to happen in the past and that used to happen frequently, that would happen often, right? So when you want to talk of something like that, we use certain adverbs of frequency, such as always, forever, to express that that particular action used to take place repetitively, right? Repetitively. So let's take a look at the examples, and let's take a look at example number 1 under rule number 4. My grandfather was always encouraging me for driving lessons. My grandfather was always encouraging me for driving lessons. Repeated action in the past. Now take a look at this example. Be thorough that my grandfather and his encouraging and his act of encouraging took place again and again in the past. It does not take place any longer. This encouragement is no more there, but it was there, and the action of encouraging took place again and again, repetitively, right? So to show the repetition or to express the repetition, we can use adverbs of frequency such as always or forever. So we say, my grandfather was always encouraging me for driving lessons. Okay? All right, example number 2. Zach was going to accept the job offer in London, but changed his mind later. Zach was going to accept the job offer in London, but changed his mind later. So what has happened here? You see, we also use the past continuous to talk about future actions that were planned in the past, but somehow those actions did not take place later, did not take place for some reason. Okay? So Zach was going to accept. He's no longer going to accept it. He wanted to. So he was going to accept the job offer in London, something that he would do in the future. But later, however, he changed his mind and did not do so. So Zach was going to accept the job offer in London, but changed his mind later. So a future action planned in the past, but did not take place later. Okay, to talk of such actions, we can use the past continuous tense. I hope I'm clear. Now remember, the present continuous tense is formed in the following way. Subject plus was or were plus the base form of the verb plus ing. All right? Subject plus was or were, depending on the subject and depending on the number of the subject. If the subject is singular, we go with was. If the subject is plural, we go with were. So subject plus was or were plus the base form of the verb plus ing. Example, I was talking to my supervisor yesterday when you called. I was talking to my supervisor yesterday when you called. Okay. The past perfect tense. Interesting and tricky. The past perfect tense, how to use the past perfect tense, when to use the past perfect tense, when to say when to describe actions in the past perfect tense. Rule number one, when we refer to completed actions in the past, okay, please follow. When we refer to completed actions in the past, we can use different past forms to indicate what we mean. So when you just naturally want to talk about certain things that took place in the past, or you want to talk about actions that took place in the past, you just use the simple past tense. Or you can use many past forms, different past forms, such as, for example, the example under rule number one, the first example under rule number one. As the US stocks rose, the Asian market rebounded. In this case, you have two things happening, right? The US stocks rose and the Asian market rebounded. Now, both these scenarios are explained or are said in the past, in the simple past tense, right? Simple past tense plus simple past tense. So the US stocks rose, as the US stocks rose, the Asian market rebounded. Now, this we understand, but when do we exactly employ the past perfect tense? We use the past perfect tense for an action or situation that happened earlier, and the simple past tense for the action or situation that occurred later, right? Remember this, two actions taking place. Now, one of those actions took place earlier, and the following action the other action took place later, after the first event, after the first action, right? So both these actions are relevant, and the actions are subsequent to each other, right? Okay, to talk of such actions or to talk of such events, you talk of the first event, the event that took place earlier, in the past perfect tense, and the subsequent event or the following event in the simple past tense. Like in the example number one, or like in example number one. The secretary had prepared all the reports before the directors arrived for the meeting. Here, the first event or the first action is explained in the past perfect tense, and the following event is explained in the simple past tense. The secretary had prepared all the reports before the directors arrived for the meeting. So the secretary's preparing the reports took place before the directors arrived for the meeting, right? So the secretary had prepared all the reports before the directors arrived for the meeting. Number two, the situation had already deteriorated. The situation had already deteriorated by the time the two leaders agreed to peace talks. Here as well, you can see the situation had already deteriorated, and this deterioration of the situation took place before the two leaders agreed to peace talks. Okay, so the first event, the earlier event, is said in the past perfect tense, and the subsequent event or the following event is said in the simple past tense. The situation had already deteriorated by the time the two leaders agreed to peace talks. Okay. Moving on to the second past perfect tense rule. We use the past perfect tense with words like already and just to refer to actions which were completed before a specific time in the past. We use the past perfect tense with words like already and just to refer to actions which were completed before a specific time in the past. All right. So here again, you're going to talk about two actions, but you use the words already and just to refer to actions that were completed before their subsequent actions, before their following actions. Okay. And to emphasize or to intensify or to emphasize on the fact that the first event took place already before the following event, we use words like already and just. All right, examples should make this idea clearer. Anne had already walked 100 meters down the road when she remembered that she hadn't locked her front door. Follow this. Anne had already walked 100 meters down the road. First event, right? She had walked 100 meters down the road. And then she remembered that she hadn't locked her front door, right? So to show that before she could remember that she had forgotten to lock her front door, before she could remember it, right? She had already done something. So by the choice of the word, by the use of the word already, you're focusing on the first action, that the first action had been done already before she could think or before she could do the next or the subsequent or the following action, before she could take the following action. So Anne had already walked 100 meters down the road when she remembered that she hadn't locked her front door. A completed action before a specific time. Okay, number two, we had just had our coffee break when we met some old friends outside the cafe. We had just had our coffee break when we met some old friends outside the cafe. Here as well, we had already had our coffee and then we met some old friends at the cafe. All right, so we say we had just had our coffee break when we met some old friends outside the cafe. With the use of the word just, you want to emphasize on the fact that the first action had already taken place, had already been done, and only then we came across something else. Okay? All right, moving on to the next slide. We have the third past perfect tense rule. We use the past perfect tense with time words and phrases. We use the past perfect tense with time words and phrases such as always and more than once to refer to repeated actions in the past. We use never to refer to an action that had not taken place up to the point of speaking. And we use yet for an action that we expected to happen in the past, but which had not taken place up to the point of speaking. Examples: our parents had always coaxed us to eat vegetables when we were young. The old janitor had told us more than once that the lifts were not functioning well, but we had not paid attention. The group had never heard of the famous scientists who Peter spoke about. We hadn't chosen the venue for our corporate retreat yet when a colleague suggested the theme park. Okay, I'll explain all these four examples to you. The first example, see, we use always, right? We use the past perfect tense with time words and phrases such as always to refer to repeated actions in the past. Remember this. First, try to understand this. We use always time phrases or adverbs of time or adverbs of frequency such as always or more than once to refer to repeated actions that took place in the past, right? Okay, such as our parents had always coaxed us. Coaxed means persuaded us, right? Our parents had always persuaded us to eat vegetables when we were young. Now they don't do it any longer, and we are not young anymore. But when we were young, our parents would always coax us, meaning would always persuade us. So you say it, use the past perfect tense to exactly describe or say what your parents used to do, right? So our parents had always coaxed us to eat vegetables when we were young. Okay. Similarly, with more than once, using such adverbs or time phrases to refer to repeated actions that used to take place in the past and the actions and those don't take place any longer. Number two, the old janitor had told us more than once. The janitor did tell you, or the old janitor had told us more than once that the lifts were not functioning well. The lifts were not functioning well, but we had not paid attention. Okay. The third one, however, we use never. When do we use never? The adverb of time never, when we do so, when we want to refer to an action that had not taken place up to the point of speaking, up to the moment to which you're referring through your speech, right? So the group had never heard of the famous scientists who Peter spoke about. Okay, the group had never heard of the famous scientists whom Peter spoke about. All right. So yes, by the use of the word never, you want to mean that that very thing had not taken place, right, until the point of speaking, until the mention of it. All right, we have a question here. Let's see. Rashid Al-Haq has a question, is asking, already and just are also used in the present perfect tense. This is a bit confusing. Yes, of course, already and just are definitely used in the present perfect tense. At the same time, besides using already and just in the present perfect tense, you can also use the same with the past perfect tense as well. Under what circumstances? Under these circumstances, the circumstances we're discussing now, right? So when you want to talk of certain actions, certain past events that took place in the past, but those actions took place repetitively, right? To express or to refer to those actions, you use always and just, such as my father had always encouraged me to tell the truth when I was young. My father had always encouraged me. My father had always encouraged me to speak the truth when I was young. So you see, when I said always, I mean that action that my father telling me to speak the truth or encouraging me to speak the truth used to take place or happen many times, right? Lots of times, repetitively. But that doesn't happen any longer. My father doesn't encourage me any longer, but he used to do so in the past, right? So I use always with the past perfect tense to refer to an action that used to take place in the past repetitively. Clear? I hope so. All right. We hadn't chosen the venue for our corporate retreat yet when a colleague suggested the theme park. When we use the word yet with the past perfect tense, we do so when we want to talk about an event or when we want to talk about an action that was expected to happen but did not happen until the point of speaking. All right. So we hadn't chosen the venue for our corporate retreat yet. It's like you're telling someone, you're sharing your experience of something with someone, and then you're doing so, you're saying that, we hadn't chosen the venue for the corporate retreat yet. When you say yet, you don't mean until the point of your describing or, saying to your friend, not until that point of time, but until the point of time or until the point of mention of which you're mentioning to your friend, of which you're describing to your friend. So we hadn't chosen the venue for our corporate retreat yet when a colleague suggested the theme park. All right. So we hadn't chosen the venue for our corporate retreat yet when a colleague suggested the theme park. Now remember, how do we form the past perfect tense? The past perfect tense is formed the following way: subject plus had plus the past participle form of the verb. Subject plus had plus the past participle form of the verb. John had reached the office. John had reached the office when he remembered that he had left his briefcase at home, right? So first you put subject followed by had. It has to be had because it's in the past, because it is the past perfect tense. So John was any subject plus had plus the past participle form of the verb. Okay, the past participle form of the verb. So in this case, we're using reached. John had reached the office when he remembered that he had left his briefcase at home. All right, done with the past perfect tense. Now we have the past perfect continuous tense. What do we have here? The past perfect continuous tense, or we use the past perfect continuous tense to refer to an action which had been going on continuously up to that time in the past when something else happened. Follow this. We use the past perfect continuous tense to refer to an action which had been going on continuously up to that time in the past when something else happened, right? Okay, a lot like the past perfect tense, just in this case, you want to talk of the earlier event in the continuous tense, okay? So what do you say? Let's take a look at the examples. Mr. Lee had been managing the factory for 25 years before he retired last year. Mr. Lee had been managing the factory for 25 years before he retired last year. The patient had been consulting Dr. Mu until he was referred to me. The patient had been consulting Dr. Mu until he was referred to me. And both these examples, something had been happening until another event followed, until something else happened, right? So number one, Mr. Lee had been managing. Now he stopped managing when he retired. So Mr. Lee had been managing the factory for 25 years before he retired last year. So until he retired, he was managing. And you want to talk of this managing thing in the continuous tense, right? So you say Mr. Lee had been managing in the past perfect continuous tense for 25 years before he retired last year. And the subsequent event, or the event that follows the past perfect event, right, is said, of course, in the simple past tense. So you say Mr. Lee had been managing the factory for 25 years before he retired last year. Similarly, in the second example, the patient had been consulting. The patient had been consulting Dr. Mu until he was referred to me. The patient has been referred to me, but until he was referred to me, what did he do? Or what had he been doing before he was referred to me? He had been consulting Dr. Mu, right? So the earlier event in this case is said in the past perfect continuous tense. The patient had been consulting Dr. Mu until he was referred to me. All right, let's take a look at the formulae here. Remember, the present perfect continuous tense, however, now we are looking at the present perfect continuous tense. The present perfect continuous tense is formed in the following way. Subject plus have or has plus been plus the base form of the verb plus ing, such as number one, I have been lecturing on English grammar for quite some time now. I have been lecturing on English grammar for quite some time now. The past perfect continuous tense, however, is formed in the following way. Subject plus had plus been plus the base form of the verb plus ing. The committee had been debating on the issue until the reforms were proposed. All right? So we discussed the present perfect tense yesterday, and I'm sure all of you remember it well. If you don't, I would suggest you to go and look up my lecture once again, right? So the present perfect tense is used when you want to talk of something that has been happening since a particular time in the past, right? So I have been doing this, for example, I want to say that I've been doing something since the year 2015. So I can say that I have been lecturing or I have been teaching since 2015. I have been teaching since 2015. So when you say so, you mean that this action that you're talking about is still happening, is still very much in the present, right? But when you switch to the past perfect continuous tense, right, you mean that you don't do the action any longer, but you used to do it, and you stop doing it and you stop doing it when something else took place, right? Or you had been doing so until another event, until another action, until another situation, until another, until a following event took place, until a subsequent event took place. Okay, so the committee had been debating. The committee is not debating on it any longer, but the committee had been debating on the issue, on some issue, until the reforms were proposed, until something else happened. The reforms were proposed. So the committee had been debating on the issue until the reforms were proposed. All right. So yes, this is pretty much it from the past tense forms, and I hope I have been able to explain these intricacies to all of you. If not, however, please do let me know in the comment section. I will try my best to clarify your confusions, inshallah. All right. And for those of you who have registered already, I would like to ensure you that please wait. You don't have to get so, many of you seem very panicked when you don't receive the quizzes. There is no reason to be panicked, or there is no reason to become restless. Just, comment in the comment section. Let me know that you haven't reached your quiz. There is no need to email me or somehow there is no need to, reach out to me in any other way. If you haven't if you haven't received any quiz, just comment in the comment section. I'll know you. I'll figure your name out. I'll figure your email out, and I will email you your quizzes, the quizzes that you may not have received. However, the best way to receive the quizzes is, of course, to have registered. So please register. If you haven't registered once, register. But if you already have registered, there is no need to register again. Okay. Tomorrow, inshallah, we will discuss the future tenses or the future tense forms, right? And yes, so I hope to see you all tomorrow again. Please stay well and take care until tomorrow. So yeah, all right then. All the best to all of you. See you all tomorrow again. Allah Hafiz.